8 hours until the massacre at Firth Asylum. John found himself packed into the most depressing room he'd ever been in. And an undisclosed, that was really saying something. It was a gymnasium in the depressing old Firth TB Asylum, a building that had been old, abandoned, and almost certainly haunted since his father was a kid. Inside, the place was even more of a rotting, mildewing shithole than out. The long boards in the old gym floor had warped and curled up over time, creating a rippling floor that, if painted blue, would look like the surface of the ocean on a windy day. He didn't see Amy there, but he wouldn't have even if she were. There were partitions with curtains set up to divide the gym into dozens of little rooms containing cots. Teams of guys in those spooky Darth Vader spacesuits were rolling a cart from one room to the next, taking blood samples from everyone. John wondered what exactly they were checking for. He wondered what his blood alcohol level was. John's hands were still bound behind him. Everybody else was getting a standard checklist read off a clipboard. Are you having hallucinations? Any unexplained urges or mood swings? Are you experiencing any unusual sores or lesions in the mouth area? But they came back to his cot twice after his interview, asking him his name, asking how he knew Dave and Amy, and so on. Finally, they asked him if he knew Amy's whereabouts, and John felt a Gatorade bucket of relief get dumped over his head. They don't have her. On the fourth visit, they brought a white spacesuit that contained a smiling, gray-haired guy who John instantly disliked. Hello there, John. I'm Dr. Bob Tennant. How are we today? I know you somehow. I don't believe we've had the pleasure of meeting, but I know your friend, David. Right. You're his crossbow therapist. Tennant grabbed a rolling office chair and dragged it over. He sat on it backward, straddling it so that he could cross his arms over the back in a casual, folksy way, which looked absurd in his huge, bulky, hazardous materials suit. He pulled out a device with a series of clips dangling at the end of thin wires. Your left hand, please. Tennant clipped the 5 clips to John's fingers. At the other end of the wires was a box with a small screen. Tennant punched in some settings. Was this thing going to give him a manicure? Now, please, answer the following questions honestly. They might seem odd to you, but reading your reaction will give us vital insight into your condition. John said. Whatever. Wait, you said no, David. Present tense. Is Dave still around? We'll explore that in a moment. As you can imagine, John, we're working just as hard as we can to give a clean bill of health to the people who don't need our help, so we can devote as much time and attention as we can to the ones that do. Right. And by help, you mean throwing them behind that goddamn prison camp you built next door? You feel what we're doing here is unethical. Is that some kind of joke? You can't tell me the government knows what's really happening here. We have rights and shit. Why do you say that? Why do I say there is such a thing as human rights? Wait, what is all this? Who are you? You understand the irony of you asking that question, when my entire role here is figuring out who, or what, you are. You and the rest of the patients in this facility. We have rights either way. Human rights. Yes. But you may no longer be human. Jesus Christ. Look at me. You know damned well there's nothing wrong with me. I'm sitting here having a rational conversation with you. In English. There's a species of carnivorous turtle whose tongue has evolved to look exactly like the worms local fish are known to eat. The fish swim right into its mouth, going after the worm, only to have their heads severed by powerful jaws. If, say, a hypothetical predator of humans had learned to mimic human speech and mannerisms in order to make it more efficient predator, that would hardly make it human. Or guarantee its rights under our Constitution, or any common system of morality. Oh, holy shit. The whole world has gone insane out there, hasn't it? So you just throw everybody in a concentration camp and figure you'll sort it out later? That's where things are at? Your friend called the quarantine a prison. But you have elevated it to concentration camp? Your generation does have a flair for the hyperbolic when it comes to describing your own adversity. Wait, so you did talk to David? So he's alive? Tennant looked up from his readout and said, "Let's explore that. That'll be a good jumping off point for us. If David were here, but was infected, would he still be David?" What? Say his personality remained exactly the same, but the parasite caused his head to transform so that his face was replaced with the face of a leech, complete with circles of tiny teeth for sucking human blood. Would you still consider him to be your old friend? Are you saying he's infected, or are you just fucking with me? Instead of answering, Tennant studied the screen on the device hooked to John's fingers and made some notes on his clipboard. Good. Now, let's say the opposite happened. Say he still looked, spoke, and acted like David, but was, in reality, an inhuman predator. How would that make you feel? Please answer. Are you fucking serious? Please, we have a lot of patients to get to. It would make me feel bad. Tennant nodded and checked something off of his clipboard. Now, let's say that he was not infected, but was sent to quarantine with hundreds of people who are, and that their infection has dissolved the part of their brain capable of making moral decisions. And let's say that they overpowered David, restrained him, defecated into his mouth and taped his mouth shut with duct tape, and left him there to writhe and slowly swallow feces all week. How would that make you feel? Who the fuck are you? A check of the screen. A mark on the clipboard. Almost done. Now, if you had to choose, either to have Amy Sullivan gang raped by 27 infected males in town over the course of 10 days, or to have David's digestive tract surgically restructured so that his large intestine fed directly into his mouth, which would it be? And please, provide support for your answer. You're fucking crazy. Tennant glanced at his clipboard and said, "If you had to choose, and if you were not allowed to see either ahead of time and had no other information to go on, would you rather fight Mind Crow or Gonadulus?" This isn't a government operation, is it? If it wasn't, tell me, how would that make you feel? You're behind this. All of this. You people released that thing in Dave's house. You set all of this in motion. What's your real name? Tennant casually glanced at another page on his clipboard and said, "All right, John. I think we're in good shape here. What we're going to do is observe you overnight. Standard procedure. Don't read anything into it. And tomorrow morning, we'll do this all again, so we can cross-check the results. Between now and then, I want you to really mull this over. If you were carrying the parasite right now, how would you know?" John didn't answer. Tennant stood, pulled the clips from John's fingers, and as a goodbye, said, "You are now aware that your lower jaw has weight, and that it requires effort for you to hold it up. Good evening." "7 hours until the massacre at Firth Asylum." Amy was in the Zombie Response Squad's headquarters, aka an old RV Josh inherited from his parents. Parents who Amy suspected were fairly rich. One wall featured a rack of 5 guns that Amy had never seen outside of an action movie or video game. Josh insisted on showing them all to her, and the footlocker of bullets and shotgun shells they had stockpiled. She nodded and tried to act impressed, but she had no idea what she was looking at. The guns all looked like they would knock her over if she tried to shoot one. Josh insisted this wasn't the case, that he would show her how to shoot if she wanted. He asked her if she wanted anything to drink or to eat, or, anything else, because he was there for her. Massages, boob inspections, whatever. Amy couldn't get John on the phone, but at this point she expected that, and to be honest, hated his guts for it. Josh was on his laptop now, showing her a map of undisclosed that somebody was updating with zombie sightings. There was a big red blob in one corner, and Amy asked if that meant there were a whole lot of zombies there, or if there was just one flamboyant zombie who was really easy to see. That's the hospital there. They fenced it off and used it as a quarantine. They've got the place built up like a supermax prison now, but it got so bad that not even the CDC staff could stay inside it. Now it's a dumping ground. When somebody in town turns up infected, they move them there, behind the fences. So that area is pretty much 100% infected. Because if you're not, but they stick you in there anyway, well, how long are you going to last? Right. But they don't know for sure who's infected and who's not. Right. So if your neighbor or whatever calls them and says they suspect you are infected, you get dumped into that camp or whatever, which is full of hundreds of people who are infected and have turned into monsters and stuff. That's what we're hearing. Yes. Oh, wow. That's like the worst thing I've ever heard. That's what I was saying at the meeting. If you're the government and your job is to make sure this thing doesn't spread, and once you finish sweeping the town and have everybody who might be infected all in this big red blotch here, and you know for a fact that they can't be cured, what do you do with the red blotch? I'm thinking one MOAB would do it. Fuel air bomb that will cook everything within a square mile to 4,000 degrees. I bet the guy who invented that had a really weird relationship with his mother. What? Do we know when they plan to do it? Unfortunately, no. I checked the list on their website. David wasn't on there at all. What do you think that means? I think it means that keeping people informed isn't their top priority. Look at this. Amy leaned over Josh's shoulder and watched a black and white video clip play out. It didn't look like anything. Some dark squares and tiny dots. At the center were white crosshairs, and some numbers were ticking off in the corners. It's an aerial video. A military pilot leaked it. I think it's a gun camera. This big, dark bunch of rectangles here, that's the hospital. If they zoomed out, you'd see the Reaper HQ buildings to the upper left. But it's off-screen on this view. See this? You can sort of see the fencing and stuff around the edge of the quarantine. He'll zoom in a second to get a view of the yard. The shot blinked in as the pilot upped the magnification. Much clearer now. Amy could make out the dots as people and make out the shapes outside the fence as tents and trucks. It zoomed in again. Now she could see the people in some detail, enough to tell the difference between someone sitting and standing and when someone raised their hand to their mouth to smoke or eat. She said, "Wait, that's inside the fence? Those are the infected monster zombies? They're just standing around. They look like people." "No, see this blotch here? That white part in the middle? That's heat. Fire. See all this stuff jutting out on all sides? Look close. Those are bodies. Skeletons of uninfected victims they've killed. They seem to be burning them in some kind of primitive ritual." "David, look!" "What?" "That's David. I see him." Are you sure? At this resolution, I couldn't even tell you which ones are women and which are... Oh my God, he's right there. Oh my God, I have to tell John. John was still protesting, but Amy could have read David's body language from outer space. He was staring at the fence with his arms folded, and he was really, really mad. She said, "We have to get him out of there, tonight, or tomorrow morning. How soon can we get down there?" "Amy, even if we wanted to risk a breach of the quarantine, do you want me to point out all the military vehicles surrounding that place? Plus, whatever aircraft this video came from? You heard me say it's a gun camera, right? Then I'll go myself. That's what I was trying to do, get them to take me to that place. That's what I was doing, and you stopped me, and now I'm here and David is there, and they're going to heat it to 4,000 degrees. Amy, if that's really him and he's in there with those things, then it might not really be him anymore. In fact, it almost certainly isn't." "Uh-huh. So, how soon can we get down there?" "6 hours until the massacre at Firth Asylum." TJ claimed it was around 9 p.m., which he said he could tell by looking at the moon. That sounded like bullshit, but it didn't feel like he was off by much. He and Hope were in my room, the latter heating a coffee pot full of water over a Sterno can. She said, "The last bunch of supplies had boxes of macaroni and cheese, but we don't have enough heat to boil the water that long. You know, it never occurred to me until now how much energy it takes to heat water. I mean, I've had science classes, and I understand that's why they use water to put out fires. But, when you're at home, you don't think about it. You run a hot shower or let hot water run in the sink while you brush your teeth, and you don't realize that somewhere down the line, it took, several pounds of coal to make enough electricity to heat it. We are so wasteful." TJ said, "God damn it, Hope. Why'd you have to mention hot showers? You waging a psychological torture campaign against me tonight? Don't know what I did to offend you." She dipped her finger in the water. "Okay, we got 2 flavors of ramen and they both taste exactly the same." There was a moment soon after that, as we sat around the room eating noodles out of coffee cups, hearing muffled conversations from the hall, when everything seemed normal again. We could have been camping. I felt a strange sense of calm and realized what I was feeling was the release of responsibility. Nobody expected me to be at work the next day. Nobody was trying to call me. I had no email to check. Ghost enthusiasts weren't stalking me on Facebook. Our responsibilities were stripped down to the bare biological basics: thirst, hunger, cold. All at once, I could see why lifelong convicts got to where they couldn't function outside of prison walls. You're almost functioning more at a level for which the human brain was intended. I asked TJ, what's the deal with the colors? The red and green. How'd we wind up on teams? Well, that's the thing. Nobody knows. Everybody went through decontamination, and when you stepped out of the chemical shower, you were handed coveralls. Half got red, half got green. They didn't tell us nothing or put us in different sections. Just, here, put this shit on. But it don't take Dr. House to figure out that the reds are way more likely to spider out. Carlos was a red. Sal was a red. Danny, Marcus, that fat Muslim dude. I'm not 100%, but it's not within margin of error either. Red means high risk. Pretty common sense. Everybody figured it out before anybody said it out loud. The colors started separating to themselves, as colors tend to do. Owen has the only gun. Yep, until somebody finds another. Owen has appointed himself the de facto president of the quarantine, based on the fact that he happened to find a sidearm that got left behind in the melee. A lot of human history works like that. We had boarded up the broken window, but could still hear the bonfire crackling down in the yard. TJ continued. The lobby and that bit of yard outside the lobby, that whole patio area, that's shared territory. The second floor, that's where the hospital still functions as a hospital. The doc and 2 nurses got left behind. They're treating the sick. The regular sick, you know. People keep cutting themselves on broken glass. About a dozen people got them nasty shits that's going around. You ever talked to the doc, by the way, since you've been back? No, tomorrow. I had a thing about doctors, for a very good reason. TJ continued. So, then the 3rd and 4th floors are all red territory. We're here on the 5th and up. These are green floors. The 2 sides, we don't shoot each other on sight, but it gets tense, as you saw. And you can tell which side has the gun by who's got the lower floors. Why? Hope interjected. No elevators. Nobody wants to tromp up and down a million stairs to get to their room. Everybody would prefer to just pile down at the bottom. Owen declared his people got the good floors. I said, why did I wind back up at the asylum? TJ shrugged. Like they'd tell us. Loudspeaker came on and said you needed to go to the gate. Truck hauled you away. That was Friday morning. Now you're back. How long can we keep this up before the food and everything runs out? TJ said. They dropped in supplies. Trucks dumped out boxes of stuff. I assume they'll do it again. Yeah, but I'm saying, let's say that hypothetically they can't figure out a cure or even a reliable test for the infection. They keep dumping the subjects here in the quarantine, and what? We're still here 10 years from now? Something has to give, right? Looking into his cup, TJ said, "What would you do?" Drop a nuke on it? Write a letter of apology to the surviving family members? Send him some coupons to Outback Steakhouse as compensation? Rest of the country breathes a sigh of relief. He shrugged. Yeah. That rumor started about 2 minutes after outbreak. I was hearing that shit everywhere. Man, people got a low opinion of the armed forces, don't they? Watch too many zombie movies. No way they get away with that in the real world. Hope said, "What if they cover it up? Make it look like it was something else?" I said, "What? Like a fake gas line explosion?" "No. All they have to do is poison our food, then say the infection did it." That brought silence to the room. TJ said, "Both of you think you're being cynical, but you're not. Reality is, if they wanted us dead, they don't have to do anything. The situation we got here is what cops call a self-cleaning oven. Some gang neighborhoods, they just let it be. Come back in 5 years and it's all quiet, all on its own. You know, because everybody shot each other. It'd be just like that here. Because instead of organizing and figuring out how to work together, we all got paranoid. Like Owen." He stood up. "It's early, but I'm going to bed. No TV, and it's too dark to read. What else am I going to do?" Hope said, "Ugh. The nights are the worst. I'm to where I can tolerate the days as long as nobody dies. But the nights, they go on forever." TJ said, "I agree. And yet, the night comes just the same. Like the rotation of the earth don't give a shit what we think." Hope was making a huge freaking understatement when she said the nights were the worst. I realized when TJ left that I was also exhausted, but it was only after I went to bed that it became screamingly apparent that we had no lights and no heat, and we're basically living in a third world gulag. I tried to remember what day TJ said it was. Sunday? So the rest of the country was probably watching Sunday Night Football? Or were they? Maybe it was like this everywhere. Everyone in America, huddled in the dark, waiting. TJ and Hope left the room to me at bedtime, so I guessed it was my room. I wrapped myself up in as many blankets as I could find. I knew exactly where to find them, just as I knew where to find the hunk of particle board we used to cover the broken window. My specific memories never came back, but a lot of the automatic stuff was still programmed in. I suddenly remembered that I had broken the window by throwing a little television out of it. I couldn't remember why. I shivered and wrapped up the covers a little tighter. We had a bunch of emergency kerosene space heaters that had been left behind in a storage building, but not much kerosene to fuel them. Here, on the 5th floor, we had 2 of them in the hall, and they keep them lit for a few hours at night to take the chill out of the air. But that was it. People set pots of water on top to heat, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Some people slept in the hall to be closer to the heaters, but the kerosene fumes stank so bad the stench radiated into my brain and gave me a headache. TJ pointed out that the stuff was jet fuel, after all. I shivered and couldn't get warm. Or maybe the shivering was something else. So damn quiet. No TV. No ticking clock. No soft whoosh of heat blowing through the vents. Not even the reassuring hum of countless electronic devices that you don't even register until it's gone. Somebody coughed out in the hall. A dog barked way off in the distance. I shivered. I remembered getting into a drunken argument with a guy about American prisons. Him talking about the injustice of the system. Me talking about how it's ridiculous that we spend $40,000 a year per inmate to maintain what are basically super clean hotels for rapists and crack dealers, complete with a computer lab and TV room and pool tables. But now, I understood what he was saying. That knowledge that you can't leave, it's a twisting knife in your gut. All I could think about was that razor wire at the top of the fence, meant to slice your hands down to the tendons if you tried to climb over. My own government put that there, with my hands in mind. Those hundreds of vicious blades hanging 15 feet over the bloodstains and brains in the grass of the last guy who tried to climb up. But even prisoners knew when their sentence was up. They could tick off days on the calendar, feel themselves progressing toward freedom. But this place, they could keep us here forever. Or poison our food, like Hope said. Or starve us out. Or let the drone operator use us for target practice. Or fill the yard with nerve gas. I shivered. I couldn't stop. I laid on my side and brought my knees up, trying to control it. Where was Amy right now? Could she have gotten out of town? How the hell could she, the way they were locking the place down at the end there? I thought I'd lay there, shivering, staring at the wall until the sun came up. I could sense no sleep on the horizon, but when I heard footsteps in my room later, I realized I had drifted off. I didn't move. I pulled open my eyes and stared at the wall. I heard nothing. Decided I dreamt it. My eyes slipped shut. My bed shifted. Weight. Gentle. Settling in. I thought, Hope? She was friendly earlier, but were we friendly? Holy shit, was that possible? I wouldn't think I'd do that to Amy, but here, alone, in this cold place, would I turn down a warm girl and soft skin and the chance to do the one thing that would let me forget all of this? I admitted, I didn't hate the idea. I stayed frozen, on my side, not sure what to do. I thought about reaching back, looking for a thigh or a hip. Casually, just to see who was there. I wondered if I would find her naked. An entire separate part of my nervous system roared to life at the thought. I moved my hand slowly. My heart was pumping. Now watch. You'll roll over and it'll be TJ, wearing a tiny leopard skin thong. I reached out and rolled over at the same time. I grabbed a handful of red fur. Molly. Note: do not ask the author how the details of the following sequence of events were obtained. The explanation would only leave you more confused and dissatisfied than would any theory you could come up with from your own imagination. Experienced pet owners know that if your pet ever goes missing, the first step is not to panic. The vast majority of the time, the pet will simply find its way back home on its own. Molly knew this, so she hadn't been all that concerned when her male human first went missing 9 days ago. In the beginning, things had been in a general state of agitation everywhere Molly went, so she figured it had something to do with that. That was the day all of the people had been shouting at each other and running and falling down. It was hard to find a place to sleep quietly, but eventually she found a shady spot between 2 buildings, and she curled up in the shadow of one of those huge green boxes humans use to store their extra food. This one had some great-smelling poultry in it, maybe 4 or 5 days old, but those boxes were hard to get out of once you got into them, and she wasn't hungry. She had just eaten the rest of the discarded meal that her human had forgotten to give her the night before. What passes for language among dogs, made up mostly of a lavishly detailed sense of smell and a well-tuned but cautious sense of empathy for all living things, cannot be translated neatly into English. But if it could, the closest translation of Molly's name for her human, the one other humans called David, was meat smell. His breath always smelled like meat. Always. As if he had just eaten some recently, no matter when you encountered him. To a dog, that spoke of an awe-inspiring accomplishment. She was proud of Meat Smell's ability to always have access to such riches. She knew she had taught him well. But she also knew that Meat Smell was always getting confused. Molly knew that he couldn't look after himself, and that he depended on her. She guarded his house every night, keeping all of the predators and any bad guys at bay. She sometimes let him pet her, feeling his stress and agitation melt away as he did so. She also kept dropped food picked up off the floor and fished out the edible items when he would accidentally drop them into those big flimsy bags and take them out to the yard, where anyone could get them. Molly was certain that Meat Smell would not last more than a day or 2 on his own. On the evening of that day, the day where everything went wrong, Molly had woken up after dark, the hard ground having grown cold under her. It had started to rain a little. She made her way back toward home, but that took a long time. She kept having to stop and investigate smells. There was smoke that stung her nose everywhere she went. Things were burning here and there, and she knew that could not be good news because the humans were really riled up. When things started catching on fire, that rarely calmed them down. She had stopped and sniffed a patch of fresh blood, and the freshly dead human laying next to it in the rain. A little way down the road, she stopped and smelled another one, sniffing around where some of its insides had spilled out onto the ground. She got closer to her home, and there were several such people laying around, with parts separated and some burned up. One of them was very small. None of them were Meat Smell. She would have known that from far away. The smoke smell was here too. There was no fire now, but there had been recently. Now, everything was just smoky and cold and wet. She went into the house because the door was open and went right to her food and water dishes. It was all wrong. Everything was all black and twisted. Her water dish had water in it, but it was rainwater that tasted like smoke. There was no food in her dish at all. That is when she knew Meat Smell was in trouble. He would not forget food time. If he had forgotten to feed Molly, who knew how long it had been since he had fed himself? It was then that Molly had noticed that it was still raining on her as she stood over her bowls. This wasn't right. The wind was still coming in, too. Where was the warmth and light and the endless food smells? She went looking for her bed, but even it was cold and wet and strangely flat. She couldn't get comfortable. She hated sleeping in the rain. and trotted around outside the house until she found the small entrance to the space under the floor where she sometimes went when she didn't want to be bothered. It was nice and dry and shielded from the wind. She curled up on the dirt and drifted off, deciding that if Meat Smell came back soon, she would let him sleep down here too. Light poured into the entrance to her sleeping spot, and Molly instinctively moved to go somewhere darker. But then she realized Meat Smell still was not home, and that he was probably somewhere scared and hungry, and waiting for Molly to come get him. Molly went on the hunt. Tracking Meat Smell would clearly begin with the last spot where she had seen him, at the little building down the road where he always bought his rolls of spicy meat. She set off down the street under the morning sun. She was disappointed to see that the humans had not settled down one bit after a night's sleep. A lot of men who were all wearing the same clothes, with big coverings over their heads, were shouting at the people who were all wearing different clothes, maybe telling them that they should all be wearing the same clothes too. There was a terrible bang, and Molly flinched. Noises that loud didn't happen in the normal world. Only people could make sounds like that. One of the different clothed people fell over, and they weren't alive anymore. Molly ran to get some distance from the shouting people, then turned one last time to get a look. She had noticed something curious and had to double check. One of the people in the different clothes crowd was not, in fact, people. He looked just like a person, but he was something else, just pretending to be one. It was the same for one of the same clothed people. And she got the feeling the other same clothed people did not realize this. This phenomenon was not new to Molly, but she always took note of it because it seemed to be the source of a lot of anxiety for Meat Smell and his friends. Molly hurried down the street and arrived at the tiny spicy meat building. No one was there at this time in the morning, but the place was bursting with smells. Not just all of the exotic meat the place was cooking in big heaping piles, but of people. Molly sniffed the ground, making a full circle of the hard, cold surface around the building. She picked up the scent of Meat Smell and the angry man who was trying to hurt Meat Smell, and John. She followed the scents right to the narrow door, now standing open. She sniffed her way into a little room full of items that were not food. She sniffed and sniffed, in an instant learning the long and dramatic story of a possum who had died nearby a few days ago. Then someone stepped in the juices that leaked from his body. Then they tracked it into this room. Then a cat slept in here, not even 1 day ago. Molly was so distracted by the drama of the tiny room's floor that she failed to notice that the sun had gone away. She turned around and went back outside, only to realize she was no longer at the little building. She was now looking at a flat expanse of pavement exploding with fresh smells. Blood, sweat, smoke, terror. Molly had sniffed and sniffed, taking it all in, replaying through her nose the story of scared men killing other scared men. There. Meat Smell had been here. The scent led off toward where lots of the same clothes men were gathered. Meat Smell was not among them. There was a fence that went both ways as far as Molly could see, and she sensed that Meat Smell was on the other side. So she just needed to find a way in. Shouldn't be a problem. Molly went and found a sunny spot and curled up and went to sleep. It took a full week to find her way in. In that time, she was chased by some of the same clothes people and other dogs, and was almost hit by cars more times than she could remember. But she made it, inside the big building full of terrible smells, layers upon layers of ancient sickness and slow death. Now she was curled up next to Meat Smell, and it wasn't raining on them, and everything was back the way it was supposed to be. She fell into a deep sleep inside this huge building full of anxious and tired people. many of whom, she noticed, were not really people. 4 hours until the massacre at Firth Asylum. John had lost track of how many consecutive days he had woken up not knowing where he was. This place was full of people and echoes and creaky boards and mold. Someone was shouting at him to wake up. He sat up on the cot, and the first thing he saw was one of the terrifying Darth Vader guys holding a machine gun. John thought, oh, right. It's this bullshit still. 2 spacemen surged forward and lifted John off his cot and took him roughly out of the gym and into an old shower room covered in ancient chip tiles held together by mildew. John half expected to see a dozen naked men in black space helmets snapping towels at each other. Instead, he found himself alone. The long, dry shower room now piled high with boxes of rubber gloves and syringes and trash bags and every other thing. He was alone for 10 minutes, until he was joined by Detective Falconer. Shouldn't you be wearing a spacesuit? Falconer was wearing his street clothes, jeans, a black turtleneck, and an empty shoulder holster under his armpit, cowboy boots, a little bit of beard stubble. John wondered if the guy would walk from one end of the street to the other without winding up covered in bitches. Falconer said, "A suit would help, wouldn't it? Might buy you a few seconds. Where's Amy?" "Who?" "Dave's girlfriend? Redhead? Only one hand?" "They snatched her up, both of us, but I think she got away. They don't seem to know where she is. I don't know if she's in town or..." "Didn't see her." "What about Dave?" "I can ask, but they won't tell me either way." "Because you don't work for the CDC?" "Does this shit look like the CDC to you? You see what those guys were wearing? What they were packing? No, they're not the CDC, and I'm not one of them. I'm being processed for infected, just like you. I turned myself in. I got them to let me talk to you because I said you might have some information. But when we're done, both of us will get tossed over the fence down at the hospital. And it sounds like nobody comes back out of there." "You turned yourself in? Great plan you had there, Detective." "I am really trying to restrain myself here. Do you understand? This all happened because of you two shitbirds." "Man, fuck you. I don't think Dave made it out. Did you know that? I'm pretty sure he got his brains blown out when everything went bad. Or if not, they got him after shit went to hell. Either way." "Well, I'm sorry if that's true. But I can say that I don't know that to be true either. Some people were killed in that first round of riots, but I never heard that he was among them." John shrugged. "But none of this is my main point." Falconer moved to a spot where he could see the gym from where he was standing, making sure nobody was close enough to listen. "My point is, I've seen everything I need to see in here. So I figure that instead of rotting in their quarantine, I might as well get to the bottom of this and save the world." John stood up. "Now you're talking. Don't get excited. If I think you can help me, I'll get you out of here too. But you have to prove you can help me first." John sat. "Okay, fine. Want me to show you some karate or..." "I watched both of you go into a door at a taco stand and not come back out. Where did you go?" To a construction site outside of town. How? Magic door. No, seriously, don't get mad. The door is magic. It's not my fault. But it didn't work for me. And if the illegal aliens they got manning the grill at that place go through the back door, they're not going to wind up outside of town. Correct. Neither will most people. Me and Dave can do it. So can some other people around town. They're the ones who built the doors. We just stumbled across them. Doors? There's more than one? Yeah, they're all over. And who are these people who put them there? We'd love to find out. They're very well funded and very powerful, and they dabble in weird shit. They're also almost certainly the people responsible for this outbreak, which, as Dave tried to explain to you, is the work of invisible monsters. I think that tenant guy is with them. He has a vibe. A few days into this situation, CDC, military, everybody pulls out, and this new agency, Reaper, sweeps in. They got all the right equipment and all the right training for this exact thing, and nobody has ever heard of them before. John shrugged as if to say, sounds about right. These guys, the ones you say are behind this, do they do anything else other than build magical doors and monsters? I'm having a little bit of trouble figuring out how they make money off that. Dave thinks the monster stuff is a side effect, an accident. He thinks they're experimenting under the table with the door stuff. Quantum teleportation or wormholes or however they do it. And that when they started dicking around with the fabric of space-time and dimensions and so on, weird shit started leaking through from, other dimensions or wherever they come from. But the stuff that came through, don't think of it as just animals that run around biting people. Some of it is intelligent, super intelligent, maybe. Dark shapes, like ghosts. John could tell from Falconer's face that he was losing him. Detective, all that stuff I just said, we didn't just fill this in with our imagination. We've had encounters here and there. Stuff has leaked out from inside the operation. We look like a couple of assholes, but Dave has actually worked really hard to put this together. And you've seen enough weird shit in your time here to give us just a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. These people, you think they're part of the government? I think that when the government comes to investigate something that goes down here, these guys can make some calls and that shit just disappears. Cases get closed. Also, they've been around a while. Stories about this town go back as far as history books go. Maybe forever. What's so special about this town? Don't know. Maybe there's some kind of electromagnetic conditions that make it ideal for whatever it is they do. Maybe they just got a good deal on the land. Who knows? And what's so special about you and David? Why can you use the doors? Why can you see the monsters? Short answer, we're magic. Longer answer, he and I took a magic potion that gave us the ability. The longer still answer is that a drug hit the streets. Looks kind of like molasses or motor oil that hasn't been changed in a decade. The dealer was calling it soy sauce. You take it and you change instantly. The veil comes up off your perceptions. When you're on it, the first few hours, you're like a fucking demigod. You can slip through time, space, unlock the mysteries of the universe and shit. Then you come down and you feel normal again. But some of the effects are permanent. You become a member of the club. That drug, it came from these people, right? All the weird shit comes from them. Yeah. You have any of it left? The drug? You don't want to take it. It kills 99% of the people who come in contact with it, mostly in gruesome ways. The dealer who sold it to me, they found him splattered on the walls of his trailer. But in answer to your question, yes, we do have some of the soy sauce left. Where? I'll take you to it. No bullshit. But we gotta get out of here first. I agree. And I'm gonna take a wild guess and say that they're not gonna agree to release us, even if you wave your badge at the dude guarding the door. Falconer said, You're right, for once. But I don't know if you realized it, but these assholes picked the single most fucked up building in a 100-mile radius in which to set up their ad hoc HQ. They have generators in the parking lot and power cables draped through windows and boxes stacked everywhere. I'm thinking they have not had time to work out exactly what they would do in the event of something unexpected, like a fire. We're totally on the same page here. Let's burn this shit down. Falconer closed his eyes, let out a steadying breath, and said, No. We just need some smoke. Enough to make them go through the process of carefully moving all of these patients and staff and shit out of the building. All those guys in their bulky-ass spacesuits tripping over cables, patients trying to escape. And in the confusion, we slip away. Now, if I go out there now and occupy as many staff as I can with some ruse, do you possess the resourcefulness to sneak away and create a nice, smoky, but controlled fire in a trash can somewhere without fucking it up? John looked him dead in the eye and said, Throw some rubber gloves in there. It'll smell just like a fucking electrical fire. 3 hours, 45 minutes, until the massacre at Firth Asylum. I marched Molly into the hallway, intending to ask if anybody had seen her around before. Hell, maybe she'd been here from the start and we just missed each other. I got my answer without asking. As soon as we stepped into the hall, a dozen people gathered around and said, How'd you get a dog in here? Molly wasn't talking. She just panted and wagged her tail and let everyone pet her. She was filthy. Mud caked on her legs and chest. Was there a spot to dig under the fence unnoticed? Both fences? It only took 10 minutes for word to filter down to the yard, and for Owen to call a meeting because apparently he could do that in his role as only guy with a gun, according to Robert's Rules of Order. Shortly thereafter, at least 100 people were huddled in the yard around the fire pit. The night air was cold as shit, so we all huddled around the smoldering coals and blackened, smoking rib cages, rubbing our hands together and hoping nobody was secretly taking our picture. Kind of hard to run for office later with a photo circulating of you warming your hands over a pile of glowing skulls. Owen had the automatic in his hand, but wasn't threatening with it. In this setting, it seemed more ceremonial, like a gavel. He said, I don't like it. Don't make sense. That's a big dog. It ain't like a squirrel getting past the sensors and shit out there. Dog probably weighs 100 pounds. If it can make it through, a dude can make it through. I said, well, awesome. If there's a way in, there's a way out, right? Maybe there's a place you can dig under the fence after all. Out of sight of the dipshit, interjected Owen. We have been around and around that fence. It's all we got to do all day, bro. No, there ain't no good place to cross the fence. There ain't any storm drains. There ain't any big sewer pipes like in the damn Shawshank Redemption. I shrugged. Well, I personally observed this dog in town eating a burrito after the hospital was locked down. She was on the other side of that fence and she didn't come in on the last truck, so. Speaking of which, Owen said, what are we supposed to do with it? I said, why do we have to do anything? To be clear, there's no indication that dogs can get infected, right? So we're not worried about that end of it? TJ said, nah, dogs don't get it. Animals and kids, they don't get it. Owen said, you'll bet your life on that? All of our lives? I said, so I'll check her mouth. That ain't 100% neither. So what, you want to put her down? She's our ticket out of here. Our ticket out of here is keeping this place safe and secure until we hear the all clear. There ain't no reason in the world to make a jailbreak, even if your dog leads us to a magical train platform that hauls us all to Hogwarts. Everyone stared at Owen until he said, I told you, I got a kid. Fuck off. I said, your let's remain calm and stay put speech would be a lot more convincing if you weren't giving it in front of a pile of burning skeletons. So we killed the dog because maybe she's not a dog and maybe she's some new kind of undetectable monster. We got to use that same standard on the next human who walks through those gates. Where does that shit end, Owen? Government shows up to give the all clear and it's just you and a mountain of bones? Owen had no rebuttal for this, and I have to be honest, I detected relief in his face. He didn't want to have to shoot a dog. She monsters out, and it's your ass. Owen stuffed the gun into his pocket, and apparently that signaled that the meeting was adjourned. The Reds huddled among each other, and the Greens headed back inside. I walked with TJ and said, there's something else to this, but I don't want to jump to any conclusions or anything. Molly really belongs to my girlfriend, Amy. I think Molly showing up here, it's not coincidence. I think she was sent here as a signal to me. John and Amy, hopefully just John, I guess, with Amy in some safe place. I think one or both of them are out there and are trying to bust me out or trying to show me how to sneak out. So, what does that mean? It means I have to figure out what the plan is. But I feel like they definitely have a plan. Somewhere beyond the fence, an explosion lit up the sky.